Miguel no longer knew exactly how long he had been living on the streets. The days blended into a colorless routine where survival was his only priority. He carried with him few belongings, a worn blanket, an old backpack, and unwavering faith. Despite the harshness of life on the streets, Miguel never lost hope that things could get better. His weathered face bore marks of pain, but also of a kindness that few could understand. People avoided him, looking away as they crossed his path, as if he were invisible. To many, he was just another homeless person, a reflection of failure and decline. But behind that humble figure lay a story of sacrifice and resilience. Miguel had lost everything, his family, his job, and his home, after a series of unfortunate circumstances. Yet, despite this, he never stopped helping those around him. With the little he had, he shared food with other homeless people and offered words of encouragement to those who, like him, were on the margins of society. Other homeless individuals knew Miguel for his generosity. When someone needed help, they turned to him. His heart, though bruised by the losses he had suffered, remained pure. And it was this purity that made him different. While many on the streets lost hope and succumbed to despair, Miguel kept his faith intact. He believed that God still had a plan for his life, even if it was sometimes hard to see. At night, Miguel lay under the open sky, using the starry sky as his roof and the sounds of the city as his soundtrack. The cold of the pavement was a constant reminder of his fragility, but he always prayed before sleeping, asking for strength to carry on. Even without a visible future, Miguel held the certainty that his good deeds did not go unnoticed by God. He knew that somehow his life would change. Though his life was tough, Miguel did not resign himself to the injustice he saw around him. He believed that despite all the difficulties, there was still goodness in the world, and it was this belief that kept him going. Every time he helped someone, no matter how small the gesture, he felt he was fulfilling a greater purpose. August was a man of impeccable reputation. As a judge, he had built a solid career known for his impartiality and strictness in the courtroom. To many, he represented the perfect example of justice and integrity, but in his personal life, August was a rigid and reserved man. He had been raising his son Lucas alone since his wife passed away years ago, and that loss had made him even more closed off. August compensated for the absence of a mother with zeal and discipline, always imposing clear rules and high expectations on Lucas. Although he loved his son deeply, August struggled to show affection. He believed that the best way to prepare Lucas for the world was to teach him to be strong and independent. However, this rigidity also created distance between them, and at 10 years old, Lucas felt his father's emotional absence. For August, life was about following the rules and maintaining control, and he applied this logic to all areas of his life, including parenting. When it came to his views on the less fortunate, August had formed strong opinions. He saw homeless people as individuals who had failed in life on their own, responsible for their own situations. In his mind, if someone was on the street, it was because they had made poor choices or hadn't tried hard enough. He never paused to reflect on the complexities that led someone to that circumstance. To him it was simple: you reap what you sow. Lucas, on the other hand, had a more open heart. Curious and empathetic, the boy observed the homeless people whenever they passed by, questioning why those individuals were in such conditions. "Dad, why do they live like this?" Lucas would occasionally ask. But August, lacking patience for discussions that strayed from logic, would respond curtly, "They're there because they didn't work hard enough, son. We shouldn't get involved." Yet despite his father's words, Lucas couldn't ignore the sadness in the eyes of the people on the streets. He felt a growing unease in his heart, a need to understand and perhaps help. The boy, though still young, already knew that life wasn't just about rules and orders, but about compassion and kindness, things he was starting to realize were lacking in his father. One day, unbeknownst to August, Lucas would experience for himself what it meant to trust someone who, in his father's eyes, was unworthy of trust. And this encounter would change their lives forever. It was an ordinary afternoon, the sun shining brightly in the sky, and the city moved to its usual rhythm. Lucas, as he did every Friday, was walking home from school alone since August usually worked late at the courthouse. He typically knew the way home, but that day, distracted by the sounds and hustle around him, he accidentally wandered into a street he had never seen before. The neighborhood began to feel increasingly strange, and soon Lucas realized he was lost. Fear began to settle in his chest. The streets, once familiar, now seemed threatening. He tried to find his way back, but the more he walked, the more lost he felt. The surroundings also appeared more hostile. Old buildings, graffiti-covered walls, and in the distance he could see groups of people who didn't seem friendly. The boy's heart raced. He was alone, without his father, without anyone to guide him. At that moment, Miguel, who was sitting on the sidewalk watching the city's bustle, noticed the boy. He immediately recognized the fear in Lucas's eyes. It was a look he had seen in others, and even in himself. Without hesitation, Miguel approached slowly, not wanting to scare the boy. "Are you lost, kid?" he asked in a calm and gentle voice, trying to offer reassurance amidst the chaos of the street. Lucas at first was startled to see the worn-looking man. His instincts made him wary. After all, his dad had always taught him to keep his distance from strangers, especially homeless people. But there was something in Miguel's gaze that calmed him. He didn't have the cold or distant look Lucas usually encountered on the streets. On the contrary, there was a kindness that made him feel safe. I don't know how to get home," Lucas confessed, his voice trembling and his eyes brimming with tears. Upon hearing this, Miguel knelt to the boy's level and with an encouraging smile said, "Don't worry. I'll help you find your way back. Do you trust me?" Hesitant but with no other choice, Lucas nodded. Miguel then took the boy's hand and began to guide him through the streets. Along the way, Miguel calmed Lucas with simple stories about his own life, trying to distract the boy from his fear. "I've been lost many times, but I always found my way back," he said with a smile. And although these words were true, they carried a deeper meaning for Miguel, who had often felt lost, not just on the streets, but in life. As they walked, Lucas began to feel more at ease. He realized that Miguel was not like what his father had said about homeless people. On the contrary, he was kind, compassionate, and above all, someone willing to help, even without expecting anything in return. What Lucas didn't yet know was that while he felt saved by Miguel, the whole city was looking for him. As Miguel guided Lucas through the city streets, panic began to spread in Judge August's home. Upon realizing that his son hadn't returned from school at the usual time, the judge fell into despair. At first, he tried to stay calm, believing that Lucas might have been delayed for a common reason. But as time passed without any news of the boy, August could no longer hold back his worry. He immediately called the police, and within minutes, an intense search was underway. Patrol cars scoured the city streets, asking everyone if they had seen a lost boy. Lucas's picture was shared on social media and in local newspapers, and the news quickly spread. Judge August, frantic, was determined to do whatever it took to find his son. He couldn't bear the thought of losing another important person in his life. The memory of his wife's death was already a deep scar, and now the fear of losing Lucas consumed him. Meanwhile, Miguel and Lucas continued their journey. Miguel had managed to find the way back, but as they walked through a busier street, they were intercepted by 2 police officers who were part of the search for the boy. Seeing Lucas next to Miguel, a visibly disheveled man, the officers immediately suspected the worst. "Hey, stop right there!" one of the officers shouted, running toward them. Miguel, confused, instinctively raised his hands, but before he could explain anything, he was roughly grabbed and thrown to the ground. Lucas tried to intervene, shouting to the officers, "No, he didn't do anything, he helped me!" But the officers, trained to react quickly in potential kidnapping situations, ignored the boy's pleas. To them, Miguel was clearly the culprit, a man who had abducted the child of a prominent figure in the city. As the officers restrained Miguel, Judge August arrived at the scene accompanied by more police cars. Seeing Lucas safe, he rushed to embrace his son, but his relief was short-lived. Upon seeing Miguel handcuffed and being taken to the patrol car, August's heart filled with rage. All he saw was a dirty homeless man holding his son's hand. Without thinking twice, he concluded that Miguel had tried to harm Lucas. "How dare you!" shouted August, furious as he approached Miguel. "Do you think you can just take my son and walk away unpunished?" Miguel tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. He was shocked by the violence he faced, unable to understand how his act of kindness had been so quickly misinterpreted. Lucas, still desperate, continued to try to explain. "Dad, he helped me. He found me when I was lost." But August, blinded by anger and prejudice, wouldn't listen. To him, the sight of a man like Miguel next to his son was unacceptable. He couldn't see beyond appearances. Miguel was thrown into the patrol car and taken to the station, while Lucas, still confused, was taken home by his father. For Miguel, that moment was a painful example of how prejudice could distort reality. He, who had nothing but his kindness to offer, was now being treated like a criminal. And so, the man who had saved the judge's son was taken away, wrongfully accused of a crime he never committed. Miguel was taken to the police station without any chance to defend himself. He felt the weight of injustice pressing down on his shoulders like an unbearable burden. Even though he knew he had acted out of kindness, his reality was cruelly distorted. Upon arriving at the jail, he was thrown into a cold, dark cell where loneliness enveloped him like a blanket of pain. The sound of the bars closing behind him echoed in his mind like a final sentence. He, who had always believed in kindness and justice, was now at the mercy of a system that had condemned him before even hearing his story. The days inside the jail passed slowly, each minute more painful than the last. The prejudice Miguel had faced on the streets seemed to intensify. He was treated like a criminal by the guards and other inmates, with no one caring to hear his side of the story. The weight of humiliation was almost unbearable, and at times he questioned whether there was any purpose in continuing to believe in the goodness of the world. However, even in the face of injustice, Miguel couldn't help but feel compassion for those around him. He shared what little he had with other inmates and maintained a humble demeanor, trying to keep his dignity intact despite everything. But as the days went by, the hope that had always illuminated his heart began to fade. Miguel, who had always believed that his good deeds would be seen by God, now wondered if God was truly witnessing all of this. He started to come to terms with the fate that had been imposed on him. It was on a particularly cold night, as he tried to sleep on the concrete floor of his cell, that something extraordinary happened. Miguel, exhausted and defeated, finally fell asleep. In that deep slumber he had a dream that would change everything. In it, Miguel saw an intense light, brighter than anything he had ever seen. From the light, he heard a soft yet powerful voice that he immediately recognized as God's. "Miguel," the voice said, "I have seen your good works. I have seen the kindness with which you treated those whom the world despised. I saw your generous heart and your unwavering faith, even in the face of the greatest difficulties. You may think you have been forgotten, but I am always with you. Know this, you will come out of this prison, not as the man who entered, but as someone of great influence and renown in this city. Your good deeds will not go unnoticed, and you will be exalted for your faith and compassion." Miguel woke up with his heart racing, feeling a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. Tears flowed freely from his eyes, no longer from sadness but from relief. In that moment, he knew his life was about to change. God had spoken to him, and the divine promise was clear. He would leave that prison, and his kindness would be recognized. In the days that followed, Miguel maintained his renewed faith. Although he was still imprisoned, he no longer felt the weight of injustice as intensely. He knew that something greater was on the horizon, and that comforted him. Even amidst the darkness of his cell, Miguel understood that the light was on its way. While Miguel was still in jail, Judge August was fighting an internal battle. Since the moment Miguel was arrested, Lucas had insisted on telling the truth to his father. The boy tried with all his might to explain what had really happened that afternoon. "Dad, you don't understand. He helped me, he saved me. I was lost and Miguel took me to a safe place. He did nothing wrong," Lucas repeated tirelessly. But August, out of pride and prejudice, struggled to process his son's words. Gradually, August's conscience began to weigh heavily on him. Doubts piled up in his mind. Had he judged Miguel unfairly? Was the man he sent to prison really innocent? Lucas's constant pleas began to affect him, and a quiet guilt started to gnaw at his heart. August, known for being a fair and impartial judge, was now facing a dilemma that shook his very essence. After days of Lucas's insistence, August finally relented. He decided to listen to his son more carefully and allow him to tell the whole story without interruption. Lucas, with teary eyes, recounted exactly how Miguel had found him lost and how he had protected him. "Dad, he was the only one who helped me. I was scared, but Miguel was kind to me. He told me stories, calmed me down, and was taking me home when the police found us. You have to believe me," Lucas said, his voice trembling. Hearing his son's account, August felt a knot form in his throat. For the first time, he began to realize that he might have made a terrible mistake. He, who had always prided himself on judging fairly, was now confronted with a situation where his own prejudice had blinded him. Miguel, the man he had looked down upon, seemed to be in fact a hero. Determined to correct his wrong, August decided to investigate further. He ordered the police to re-examine the case and gather testimonies from the residents in the area where Lucas had been found. The accounts confirmed the boy's version. Miguel had been seen trying to help the kid, not harm him at all. The judge felt a weight lift from his shoulders, but the remorse for the injustice committed grew within him. With the truth finally revealed, August knew the only thing left to do was to free Miguel. He personally went to the jail, something he rarely did. When the cell doors opened, Miguel looked directly into August's eyes without resentment, without anger. In his gaze was an understanding that the judge did not expect. Even after everything he had been through, Miguel seemed to harbor no feelings of vengeance. "I came to correct a mistake," August said, his voice heavy with regret. "You shouldn't be here. I was unjust to you, and for that, I apologize." Miguel, with his usual calmness, merely smiled slightly and said, "God always sees the truth even when men do not. I knew that somehow everything would work out." After freeing Miguel, Judge August couldn't shake off the weight of remorse. Every moment he replayed the scenes in which he, blinded by prejudice, condemned an innocent man. Miguel's gaze, devoid of bitterness or hurt, haunted him. There was something about that man that August couldn't fully understand. How could someone who had been unjustly imprisoned possess such inner peace? This question lingered in his mind as he tried to process the mistakes he had made. Back at his office, August spent long hours reflecting on his life, his decisions, and most importantly, his biases. Throughout his career, he had prided himself on being impartial, but now he realized that his worldview had been limited. He judged people not just by their actions, but also by their appearances, and Miguel, the man he had so quickly condemned, now represented a mirror to his deepest flaws. Lucas, who had witnessed the entire process, felt a mix of relief and sadness. He was happy that Miguel was finally free, but he couldn't ignore the sorrow he saw on his father's face. One evening, while August sat silently in the living room, Lucas approached him and with the innocence of a child said, "Dad, everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what we do afterward." The boy's words echoed in August's heart, and he knew his son was right. He needed to do something to make amends. In the following days, August struggled to concentrate on his work. He felt he owed Miguel more than just an apology. He understood that his position as a judge gave him the power to influence change, and now he was determined to use that power differently. Miguel had opened his eyes to a reality he had long ignored. Marginalized people, those he had judged without knowing their stories, needed someone to fight for them. Resolved to take action, August began researching ways to get more actively involved in social projects. He sought to understand the situation of homeless individuals, listened to stories from organizations working to reintegrate these people into society, and for the first time, he felt he could use his influence to promote true justice. But before anything else, he knew he needed to regain Miguel's trust. He wanted Miguel to understand that his apology wasn't just empty words. It was a commitment to change, both in his personal and professional life. The judge, who once viewed homeless individuals as failures, now saw them as human beings with stories, struggles, and hopes. August decided to seek out Miguel personally, determined to help him rebuild his life in any way he could. The remorse still lingered, but now there was a new spark of hope within him, the hope that through his actions he could correct the mistakes of the past and do something truly meaningful. When Miguel was released, he walked out of prison as a changed man. Though he had been wrongfully imprisoned, he held no bitterness in his heart. For him, the freedom he now enjoyed was more than physical. It was a living testament that God was always by his side, guiding him through hardships. He carried with him the certainty that everything that had happened was part of a greater purpose and that his story was far from over. A few days after his release, Miguel was surprised by an unexpected visit. Judge August appeared at his humble dwelling, looking visibly lighter but still weighed down by remorse. As they met, Miguel and August exchanged silent glances. The judge, humbled in a way he had never experienced before, apologized once more, this time with words that came straight from his heart. "Miguel, I was deeply wrong about you. I underestimated your goodness and let my prejudices speak louder. I can't undo what happened, but I want to help you start over." Miguel, always with a peaceful spirit, listened attentively to August's words. He expected nothing more than what he had already received from God, freedom and inner peace. But he knew that at that moment, the judge was also on his own journey of redemption. "I accept your apology, sir," Miguel said calmly. "But I don't need much to start again. The only thing I've ever asked for is a chance to live with dignity." Touched by Miguel's simplicity and humility, Judge August made a proposal that would change the course of his life. He offered Miguel a place to live and the opportunity to reintegrate into society by helping with social projects aimed at transforming the lives of other homeless individuals. For Miguel, this was more than just an offer of help. It was a chance to fulfill the purpose he had always felt pulsing inside him. Initially, Miguel hesitated to accept. Having lived on the streets for so long, he had adapted to that environment, and the idea of leaving it behind felt daunting. But at the same time, he knew this was the opportunity God had promised him in the dream. He would leave the streets not just as another freed man, but as someone who had something to offer those still living in society's shadows. With Judge August's support, Miguel began to get involved in programs that provided assistance to the homeless, offering food, shelter, and job opportunities. He used his own experience to inspire others, showing that even in the worst circumstances, kindness and faith could prevail. Miguel, who had once been seen only as a worthless homeless man, was now a figure of hope for many. Each day he felt more integrated into the new life he was building, but he never forgot his origins. Even with all the opportunities before him, Miguel maintained his humility and faith, knowing that everything he had achieved was the result of a greater force than himself. August's transformation began quietly, almost imperceptibly. That first conversation with Miguel, where the judge acknowledged his mistake, planted a seed of change within him. Until then, August had believed that justice was about applying laws and making cold, rational decisions. But after everything that happened with Miguel, he began to see that true justice also involves compassion, empathy, and an understanding of the invisible realities faced by those who live in comfort. Once so confident in his convictions, August started to question his old beliefs. He realized he had treated the less fortunate with unnecessary harshness, judging them without knowing their stories, just as he had done with Miguel. Now he wanted to do more than just apologize. He wanted to use his position to promote real change. Driven by this new perspective, August began to actively engage in social causes. He collaborated with projects that provided support to the homeless, vulnerable families, and programs aimed at reintegrating former inmates into society. The judge, who once viewed marginalized individuals as responsible for their own fate, now understood that many were victims of unfair circumstances and a system that often ignored them. In the weeks that followed, August and Miguel grew closer. They worked together on various projects, and the judge often turned to Miguel's wisdom and experience to better understand the challenges faced by those living on the streets. For August, Miguel was not just someone he had wronged. He was a living example of faith and resilience. He saw that, Even without titles or status, Miguel possessed an inner richness that few people had. August's impact on the most vulnerable communities began to be felt. He used his influence to advocate for fairer laws and programs that offered real opportunities for those looking to restart their lives. For him, it was a way to redeem the mistake he had made, but also to transform his role as a judge into something greater, a soulful agent of justice, capable of seeing beyond written laws. Lucas, who had been the catalyst for all this change, watched with pride as his father transformed. The boy, with his pure heart, had seen the goodness in Miguel from the start, and now he saw his father walking the same path. Together, they witnessed the power of empathy and justice being applied in a practical and genuine way. Deep down, August knew that his transformation was far from over. Each new day was an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to commit even more to the values that Miguel, with his simplicity and unwavering faith, had taught him. The judge had not only found personal redemption, but also a new purpose, to fight for a justice that was more than the application of rules, a justice that reached the hearts of people. The impact of Augusto and Miguel's actions began to spread throughout the city, transforming the lives of many people who were previously invisible to society. The judge, who had once hidden behind the severity of his robe, was now known as a man of compassion and justice. The changes he promoted not only altered laws but also touched hearts. He used his position of power to create opportunities for the less fortunate while learning from every story he encountered. Miguel, for his part, had become a symbol of hope for many homeless individuals. His humility and unwavering faith earned him the respect and admiration of all. He was frequently invited to share his story, recount his experiences, and show that even in the most desperate situations there was always a way back. Miguel, the man who had once been ignored and scorned, was now recognized as a community leader, someone who had emerged from darkness to shine with his own light. At a public event organized by Augusto to promote new social reintegration programs, Miguel was invited to speak to an audience filled with authorities, business people, and everyday citizens. He stepped onto the stage with the same simplicity that had always characterized him. But now he was seen by everyone with respect and admiration. Miguel spoke of his journey, the losses, the humiliations, and the challenges he faced. But above all, he talked about the faith that sustained him during the toughest times and how God had always been by his side, even when the world seemed to have turned its back on him. "I may not have much, but I've always believed that what I can offer to others, no matter how small, has value," he said, his voice calm but filled with emotion. "It was this faith that kept me standing. And today, I am here to tell you that no matter how deep you are, there is always a way to rise again." Those words deeply touched the hearts of everyone present, and in that moment, both Miguel and Augusto realized that their lives were connected by a greater purpose. They were no longer just a judge and a homeless man who had a misunderstanding in the past. They were now agents of change, united by a common cause, promoting justice, empathy, and dignity for all. As the event came to an end, Augusto and Miguel exchanged a knowing glance. They understood that this was just the beginning of something bigger. Lucas, watching his father and his new friend, smiled, knowing that kindness and truth had prevailed. The boy, who had once been saved by Miguel, now saw how the lives of everyone around him had been transformed by the power of faith and compassion. The story of Miguel and Augusto became a living example that no matter how difficult the journey may be, no matter how deep the injustices suffered, there is always a new hope waiting. And this hope often arises from the most unlikely situations, when you least expect it. Life is marked by ups and downs. We all face challenges that seem insurmountable at some point. Perhaps you, like Miguel, have been looked down upon, wronged or humiliated by those who cannot see beyond appearances. Or maybe, like Judge Augusto, you have confronted your own mistakes and prejudices, carrying the weight of regret and the desire to do things differently. Miguel's story shows us a powerful truth. Even when everything around us seems to be crumbling, our faith and good deeds do not go unnoticed. God sees beyond what the world perceives. He knows the heart of each one of us and is by our side, even in the darkest moments. When it seems like no one is paying attention, He is present, guiding our steps and preparing something greater. Even when Miguel had nothing, he maintained his unwavering kindness and faith. He chose to keep helping others, even when he himself was in a vulnerable situation. This teaches us that during hardships, we must not let despair or pain strip away the goodness within us. Instead, these moments can be opportunities to become even stronger, to grow, and to demonstrate the character we possess. If today you face a difficulty that seems insurmountable, remember, the moments of struggle are just a part of your journey, not the final destination. Just like Miguel, you may feel wronged or hopeless, but it's important to believe that God is in control. He sees your good works, your intentions, and knows your inner strength. Victory may take time, but it will come, often in ways we can't even imagine. Augusto, for his part, reminds us that it's never too late to change. Even those who make mistakes or act with prejudice can find redemption. The key lies in recognizing our errors, asking for forgiveness, and above all, taking action to correct what was done wrong. True transformation begins in the heart, when we decide to become better, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us. So, if difficulties are trying to bring you down, stand firm. What you are going through now may be the foundation of your great transformation. God knows your heart, and just as He was with Miguel, He is with you too. No matter how lost you may feel, there will always be a new hope, a light that will guide you out of darkness. Remember, the struggle you face today can be the testimony of victory you will share tomorrow. Trust, continue to do good, and above all, keep your faith unwavering. Victory will come, and when it does, you will be stronger and more prepared for what God has in store for you.